Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of EDM, looking at some electronic dance music. This one I'm quite intrigued about. We're looking at the artist Orbital. The track is Halcyon and on and on, and it's kind of a clever title within itself. Primarily, what intrigues me though is the length. A lot of the EDM we've listened to has been short, primarily because it is very repetitive. It's there to create a beat to dance to and maybe a nice atmosphere and maybe have a bouncing back and forth of an A and a B section like we saw in yesterday's, Perturbator. But even maybe more prominently, Tuesday's Crystal Castles. 9.5 minutes is the length of a prog song, and if it's going to be that same level of repetition, I think I'm going to find myself ready to check out at 3 minutes into this. But who knows? Let's dive into this, see what Orbital is bringing to the table today. Kind of sci-fi-y. Not anymore. That lead piano-esque sound was brought us back down to earth. It's kind of like staring at the northern lights right now, actually. It's very wondrous. Still has that space element, if not pure sci-fi. And like the the piano panning around, it's like the twinkling of the stars. I kind of find it kind of difficult to dance to this though. There is a pulse here, of course, but it's not present in the music. Do they make slow dance EDM? It's electronic, and you could slow dance to it. It is music. Not what I think of first, but could be a thing. There we go. Lots of syncopation. Okay. I like the vocal layering here. Very sparse though. Drum and bass and whatever this percussion is over here. Oh, we do have a synth pedal tone. Not pedal tone, just held out note. This is the same vocal line from earlier. Recontextualization of this section. not a recontextualization, a rebuild up. We stripped it down and slowly added the layers back up, but so far this is the same thing we just heard. There's one more instrument. The vocal panning is wild. So wild. Sections like this and the intro feel a lot more ambient than I would expect for EDM. What I was thinking about regarding repetition. Alright. Definitely just a hair bit more repetitive than I would have liked. But overall had some really nice ideas to it. I don't think it justified the 9.5 minute runtime. I don't think there's 9.5 minutes of ideas here, but I appreciate that this might have external uses. For meditation, excellent. If you just want music to dance to, aside from like the opening 2 minutes, you got a bass beat there, excellent. Um, it's really great atmospheric writing. That's well, we're gonna have to talk about that in a second. I guess that second is now. Let's dive into it. It does what it does well, and I can see people finding a purpose for it, even if that purpose is just pure casual listening. It's just not my cup of tea, and I'm going to explain why. The first is that it seems to pair two things I don't think work well together. At least not for me as a casual listener. I'm going to assume that this group has fans, or artist, I should say, not group. This artist has fans, um, and that I'm just not one of them. But my big problem here is that it's driving ambience. I don't get that. And that's not to mean that it's bad. Again, as usual, I'm not some authority, I'm just some dude on the internet. This is just my opinion. But ambience does a really good job at outlining emotional ideas and allowing a song to fully explore it in a way that I liken to trance or being able to meditate to it. It's a way to divorce the song from movement, from contrast, and to allow the cyclicality of it and repetition to enable one to zone out to it. To me, ambient tends to work best in static concepts. The less moving ideas, the better. Here, there are so many moving parts. We have the 3 or 4 vocal tracks, which are constantly overlapping and overlaying on top of each other and frequently panning left, right, and center, working very well with the idea of stars I was talking about at the beginning, where it feels like we are driving past them and we got this Doppler effect going on. And this pretty much directly evokes the idea of momentum, of movement, of going past them. Whether we are moving or they are moving past us, there's an idea of momentum to that. We also have the driving bass and the syncopated bass sound, the driving drums, the bass kick and the snare, and then the syncopated uh, bass instrument, which both provide direction and momentum. And you probably can see where this is going. There's just a lot of elements in this song that are pointing somewhere and saying, let's go. That's where we're going. We're heading that direction. Let's go now. And there's a very large portion of the song that says, chill, stay a while, fully absorb yourself into what I'm doing, and don't worry too much about going anywhere. Just be. And so I'm getting two very different messages from this track. One telling me to hurry up and get to our destination, and the other one saying the journey is the core part of the adventure. And I find it very distracting to be pushed and pulled between the two of them. There are some sections that do better at the ambient, like our intro, but as soon as the pulse kicks in, starting with the bass and then bringing the drums in, specifically laying down the 4 on the floor, the ambience just doesn't have a chance anymore. It can exist, but there is no way we're not moving forward anymore. Wait, there's no way that we're not moving forward from here on out. There is no longer standing still and absorbing something. And I'm sure that this contrast, this schism between the two, is going to be something that draws people to the music. And maybe it's something that clicks for me on future listens, but this first one, it just feels like a tug of war between two sides of music. And from an artistic perspective, that's really neat. And maybe there's a purpose to this song that's supposed to describe this push and pull. I mean, for all I know, this is a song that's designed to be a musical embodiment of the need for meditation and being present and the constantly on the go modern society. And the song is supposed to be designed like I always say, there's usually an artistic idea behind music. I feel like there's very little music out there that's designed just to be music, just to make sound. And I can typically appreciate music on an artistic listen, even if it's not my cup of tea. And that might be what this ends up being for me, is something I appreciate from arm's length. It's an ambitious idea that they completely, uh, you know, landed. But I don't know that. There's nothing in the music that tells me that that's the purpose of the track. And, sometimes things get lost in translation. This is exactly what happened uh, last week, I think it was, when we did Frank Zappa's The Great Wazoo, which nothing in the song indicated what it was. And when somebody explained what Frank's concept was and what he was trying to do with the music, I was like, oh, it completely recontextualizes it. It's still a crazy eclectic track that I'm not a huge fan of casually, but from an artistic perspective, I get it now. I see what he was aiming for, and I do think he stuck the landing with it. But I find it interesting to make music that requires external knowledge to be brought in to understand. And it's a fascinating concept. It turns it multimedia in a sense, where you have to have accompanying words, text, to make it make sense. It's not a bad thing. I'm not railing against it or anything like that, but it does make it really difficult to understand on a first listen if you don't have that secondary context to it. And maybe that's what's happening here. The words themselves don't feel like words, they feel more like vocalizations. I'll be interested if we get into the lyrics and there's actual lyrics there, but as of right now, I don't hear anything in the music that would point me in any direction towards anything. So all I see is this push and pull where one side starts the song and then quickly gets overpowered until it's losing a fighting battle. And a once ambient track now feels consistently dragged towards a location. There's a lot of push and pull to this. There's a fight within it, and it's distracting for me as a listener. Again, none of this makes it bad. It just makes for a really rough first impression of it. Now, it does do a lot of things really neatly, though. This is a song based on building blocks. We have the ambient, we have a synth piano type thing, we have these interesting synth percussion sounds. We also have the electronic drum. We have the electronic bass tone. We have multiple vocalizations. And we get to hear them in various sorts of combinations. As we start off the song, we introduce most of the ambient tones, and then we bring in some of the percussion, and then we bring in the big synth with the vocals, and then we remove all that and we look at just the rhythm section, and then we layer things back into it, and then we remove other things, and it's 9 minutes of recontextualization. we have 10 pieces. What happens when we only listen to these five, these seven, these two? It's a really neat way to go about crafting a song overall where there really is only one section, but we can create multiple interpretations of it based on various permutations of the parts within. I dig it. I always dig that. It's a like it takes recontextualization and variation to the next level. I'm not entirely sure that I enjoyed it here in effect, in exercise. Many of the sections felt a bit flat to me, and as I mentioned, some of the pairings just did not work and they clashed a bit more than I would have liked. But I'm never gonna downplay how much I enjoy the pure compositional component of it. Saying, hey, I'm gonna make a song with 10 pieces and then just remix which pieces are active at any given time, and then trying to find the transitions between these. And making a cohesive song out of it that feels like it has an ebb and flow, like it has direction and linearity. It's a huge undertaking, and the song does pull it off. I can certainly appreciate that whole exercise right there of putting this together. Even if the end result is, like I said, falls a bit flat. And then there's also the production too. It's not just about layering these things, but applying different productions on them to achieve further variation on the concepts. For instance, the panning of sounds. Sometimes the piano is placed in a section, sometimes it bounces around, sometimes the vocals are placed in a section, sometimes they pan out from the center. It feels like we're driving by them. Um, there's lots of uses of compression of whatever that thing is that makes things sound more muffled and distant or closer and more present. There's panning, there's volume, there's all sorts of different things that go on in here on the production side to take something that has been recorded and modify it. And there was one other thing. Oh, yeah. The last thing I wanted to touch on before I check if this has lyrics is just the general vibe of it. At least in the first 3 minutes, I got a really strong sense of wonder and majesty, and sort of also kind of feeling small. I likened it to staring at the Northern Lights, with the piano and it bouncing all around through the panning, sort of acting as twinkling stars around this very wondrous ambience. Is a gorgeous way to open the track. Unfortunately, once the techno-y bits came in and we got, the bass and like the drums and started pushing the song more towards a dancey element, I kind of lost traction of some of that. But, I even likened the vocals being panned out to the sides as sort of like driving by them. And so the way that they stretch and blur kind of reminds me of warp speed and hyperdrive, and how the stars stretch and turn into light visually in these sci-fi films. And so I still kind of got a really strong spacey vibe from a lot of this, but I never really got another clear picture of what I was looking at or listening to in any way. And I don't know if I should put that one on me or on the music, but it does feel at least tangential to what I was talking about earlier, where the driving electronica bits got in the way of the ambience. Again, I don't know if that's exactly what happened, but that was the point when things started to fall apart for me in my experience with it, and it's all kind of connected there. I am curious what this song would sound like if it was fully explored as an ambient piece rather than something electronic. Uh, Electronica? Techno? EDM, I suppose. This is like ambient EDM, which sounds like an oxymoron. The music even feels at odds with itself. Um, But yeah, I would have liked this in a purely ambient form. I am intrigued about Orbital. Well, even Orbital, man, and Halcyon. Like, these are very sci-fi, spacey stuff. I'm intrigued about them. I think this is the first band all week. Oh no, Crystal Castles. I put on my list to check further into. So then this will be number two, though. Some EDM for me to further look into. I'm going to see if the vocals had words to them, and then we'll wrap this up. Well, there are recorded lyrics, kind of. It's just vocalizations, though. Ah, lee, laws, and oohs, or ohs, maybe. It's just a lot of that. Props to whoever decided to transpose the lyrics. Um, Interestingly, this is dedicated to Orbital members Phil and Paul Hartnellis, their mother, who was addicted to the tranquilizer Halcyon for many years. It's a remix of an earlier song, Halcyon, and is much more well known than the original, possibly because it was famously used in the Mortal Kombat film soundtrack. So that's interesting. I wonder if the original might be more palatable to my tastes, being that it doesn't have the and on element. Maybe it's a bit shorter and more direct. Maybe it's more ambient, possibly. I don't know. It says the song is built around a backmasked vocal sample by Kirsty Hawkshaw from It's a Fine Day by Opus 3. That, unfortunately, doesn't mean anything to me. But it is intriguing to find that the vocals are not something recorded and it is coming from another song. I think that wraps this up. I don't have any nice bow to wrap around all this and make it a nice, tidy, concise final section, final thought. It's an interesting track. It does some nice things, but overall it feels that it ends with itself and makes it difficult for me to really connect with it on any level, despite some of the gorgeous things that it does. Those are my thoughts on Orbital's Halcyon and on and on. Let me know what you thought. Your comments, perspectives, opinions, put all that stuff down in the comments above the comment section in the description box. You'll find a link to Linktree. In here you can find a link to Discord, you can find a link to my music, you can find ways to support the channel, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all three of those. We have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.